You're hearing the ringing of Michael's Tibetan bowl. Welcome, everyone. I'm so glad to be here with all of you today on the summer solstice to remember and to celebrate Michael. And Barbara very purposefully chose this day, the summer solstice, as Michael so enjoyed celebrating the solstice. A time of renewal and harvest in the universal cycle of birth, death, and renewal. And my name is Judy Rothwell, and beside me here we have my treasured friend, Nancy Milne, and my beloved husband, John Rothwell. We three are longtime friends of Michael, and we were among his mighty companions on the spiritual path, along with a number of you who are gathered here today. Michael was a man of many, many talents and interests and contributions. And his devotion to the spiritual path was central to his life. So it is that we would like to offer this brief ritual to honor Michael's dedication to his spiritual path. And this ritual is actually similar to what we do and did with Michael as we gathered with our spiritual community. We'll begin by lighting candles, and after that, Nancy will do a reading from one of Michael's most favorite volumes of poetry, and then John will lead us in a very brief meditation. So, we'll begin by lighting the candles. I'm going to hold them and I'm going to let you light them, okay? One at a time. Well, those candles are not very stable. Let's make them a little more stable. I hope that they'll be there. I think they're better now. Okay, so now as we light this first candle, I invite you to close your eyes for a brief moment and bring Michael into the center of your heart. And now, as we light the second candle, let's bring Barbara into our hearts, right next to Michael. And now, as we light this third candle, back up. Let's bring everyone here into our hearts, along with all of those who couldn't be present with us today. Michael's people, all of Michael's people who have journeyed with him in love and respect. So we come together, lifting Michael up in love and light.
A poem by Rumi. My soul is from elsewhere, I am sure of that. All day I think about it, then at night I say it. Where did I come from, and what am I supposed to be doing? I have no idea. My soul is from elsewhere, I'm sure of that, and I intend to end up there. This drunkenness began in some other tavern. When I get back around to that place, I'll be completely sober. Meanwhile, I'm like a bird from another continent, sitting in this aviary. The day is coming when I fly off, but who is it now in my ear? Who hears my voice? Who says words with my mouth? Who looks out with my eyes? What is the soul? I cannot stop asking. If I could taste one sip of an answer, I could break out of this prison for drunks. I didn't come here of my own accord, and I can't leave that way. Whoever brought me here will have to take me home.
Okay. Thanks, Dennis. I was looking at one of the photographs that are displaying up here of Michael in a T-shirt, and in a white T-shirt, and the saying on the T-shirt is, "When all else fails, sit quietly and breathe consciously." That kind of, yeah, that's Michael. We were members, as a number of you here were, of a spiritual group Judy referred to. It was called The Gathering, and actually the whole name was The Gathering in the Now. The now is an important. Don't fret about the past. Don't worry about the future. Just live in the now. And at the start of our meetings, we would always start with a ritual of lighting candles and and then trying to become present in the moment. And part of that was by doing a meditation. Michael was very much into meditation and taught it and was good at it. And so we thought it would be fitting to do a short meditation here. And at the start of our meetings, we would usually talk about, well, how long should we meditate? Because there wasn't any set time. And I would frequently get in there first and say, well, how about 10 minutes? And then Michael invariably would come in second and say, well, actually, I was thinking more like 40 minutes. Well, we're not going to meditate for 40 minutes today. Sorry, Michael. And we're not even going to meditate for 10 minutes, but we thought we'd meditate for 2 minutes. Okay. Now, not everybody maybe knows or has practiced meditation, so I thought I'd talk a little bit about what that involves. And there's many different types. There's transcendental meditation, there's guided meditations, etc. One I think is fairly easy is one from a book called The Presence Process. And that's one that ties to your breath, which is also, something Michael even referred to on his T-shirt of "Breathe Consciously," and it has 6 words in the meditation. No secret mantra or anything, and so you just say the 6 words quietly to yourself as you're breathing, and it goes like this: I am here now in this. And you say it, how fast do you say it? Well, you say it to yourself as you're breathing. So on the in-breath, you say, I, out-breath, am here, in-breath, now, in this. Got it? It's easy. I am here now in this. And you just say it over and over, and it tries to, it helps keep your mind present on this. And your mind may go to many things like your drive home and things like that, but just bring it back to I am here now in this. As you breathe. Do it quietly inside, otherwise you'll mess everybody else up, right? So you're just doing it quietly inside as you breathe. And Judy will time us for 2 minutes by ringing the gong at the start, and then when you hear it again, that'll be the end of the meditation. It helps to close your eyes, that helps to focus you, and then I am here now in this. Okay? Let's try it. Cool. You're on. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. I am here now. In this. And Michael in spirit is here. He is also here with us. And a beautiful, beautiful urn created by Clark. Really. And soon, we'll have libations to quench our thirst. My name is Michael Kramer. I'm a friend of Barbara and Michael, whom I met through my wife, Diana. And I'll be steering the ceremonies here on this beautiful first day of summer as we honor a very special person. You know, you don't find out a lot of things about amazing people until they're gone. Isn't that often the way? Michael Vesselago was a beloved friend and a husband and mentor, not only a lover of life and spiritual seeker, but he was trained as a medical doctor, a homeopath, psychotherapist, meditation teacher, dedicated to healing himself and the wounds of his childhood and bringing healing to other people. You've already read about Michael's training and his many accomplishments in his obituary, and you're going to hear more, much more about him in a few minutes from some people who knew him well. But before they begin, we have a few remarks from distant friends who couldn't be here with us today, some of whom have known Michael for a lot longer by now than we have. And this is from Tim Ravinus, who first met Michael when they were 7 years old at Chestnut Hill Academy back in Philadelphia. Tim says, I met Michael in 1947. Both of us were 7 or 8 years old. We became friends, remained friends ever since, and although we lived far apart, there was never a time that I didn't think of Michael as one of my handful of greatest friends of all time. Every time we spoke, I had the feeling that he felt the same way. We grew up in Chestnut Hill, an all-white, private, privileged suburb of Philadelphia. This was in the 50s. We were both upper middle class and knew we were very lucky. In fact, Michael's parents, who had emigrated to America from Paris in the 1920s, things you find out, and had been minor Russian nobility. His mother's grandmother was a Princess Meshchersky. His father and both grandfathers served in the Tsar's Corps des Pages until the Russian Revolution in 1917. We went to the Chestnut Hill Academy together until we were both 12. I left for Groton School of Massachusetts in 1952, and he came and joined my class there in 1953. Michael was a great student and always a kind and quiet and thoughtful presence. He was strong, he was a good athlete. In football, he was a linebacker and an end. I never thought of Michael as being a football player. But he was big, he was strong. And he was great. He was a great blocker, a tackler, and pass catcher. He says, I was small and I played running back. That's what Tim Ravinus says. But in football, Michael protected me. Although I was fast, I was small, too small and light these days to be a football player. But Michael always protected me. When I found a winning pass or caught a winning pass, it was always due to Michael. We both had the front and back of each other all the time. Any football success, I was in large part due to Michael. That's from Tim Ravinus. John Bingham, Michael's good friend at Groton School, writes, oh, Barbara, there are so many Michaelisms left unexplored. His treasure chest of optimism's regal jewelry has been so generously shared. With Michael blocking for me at Groton, there he is again, such purposeful and consistent force and reckless abandon as he did for his friends and his followers all his life, I always leaned full speed into his drive, knowing the hole would open and the yards gained for the team would always happen. And I sense him now, already pushing the broader boundaries of paradise, making way for following souls and those already waiting for him to join him on the other side. I hope that wouldn't happen. There it is. Now, some of the words of Katlena Rain, Michael's ex-wife. Michael moved to Seattle in about 1970 to take up residency in internal medicine at Virginia Mason Hospital, a prestigious hospital in Seattle. He was appointed chief resident there, but he didn't stop there. His interest in holistic health approaches was beginning to grow, and he began the transcendental meditation technique in May 1972. That was before the fax machine. He was inspired, thank you, by his experiences and meditation, and he went to Switzerland with me to enroll in the TM Teacher Training Program, which he completed in 1974. At the completion of that, he was invited by Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, the Beatles guy, to stay on, to collaborate in developing programs that would integrate Western medicine with the development of consciousness associated with the transcendental meditation technique. He worked on that program for several weeks and returned to Seattle, where he joined a busy established medical practice. The two doctors were close to retirement. Michael had the opportunity to take over the practice, but although he enjoyed the work, he was growing restless with the limitations of a traditional medical practice. In 1975, he was offered the position of full-time medical director at Maharishi International University, Fairfield, Iowa. He accepted. We moved to Fairfield, population about 8,000. MIU had just bought the bankrupt, empty college facility and was into its second year of operation. He was given a stipend of a little over $200 a month, American. Michael was now responsible, with the support of an RN, for providing health care to the faculty, staff, and student body of about 800 students. He was much loved by his patients, an excellent environment to explore his interest in the relationship between meditation practice and health. He was able to occasionally share call with the town physicians, but the burden of being the sole physician at MIU and on call most of the time just became too much. At that time, a new course of advanced meditation techniques was being offered in Switzerland by Maharishi. So, October 1976, back to Switzerland we went for this intensive course, and we stayed for a year. After spending some time traveling in Europe and visiting with Michael's Russian relatives in Paris and London, we returned to Seattle, where he established his own private practice focusing on integrating all that he had learned about holistic approaches to healthcare. His work was marked by curiosity, open-mindedness, and a desire to offer a high level of integrated care and affection for his patients. This is what Deborah Nussbaum says, an RPM from the clinic where Michael often worked in Emo, Ontario. It is very cold there. She writes, that's in the summer. I met Dr. Vesselago when I first started at the Emo Clinic in 2011. He was a fantastic doctor. One noteworthy memory I have of him, though I have many, was the time he took for his patients, especially those struggling with mental health problems. This example continues to remind me to take the time for each individual patient to actually listen to what they have to say, and thus provide better holistic care, body, mind, and soul. Those are some people who couldn't make it today, and because you already have some of Barbara's thoughts and recollections of Michael in his obituary, in memory of Michael, Barbara's asked me to read this poem and share it with you, written by Judah Halevi, or Emmanuel of Rome, from the 12th century. 'Tis a fearful thing to love what death can touch, to love, to hope, to dream, and oh, to lose. A thing for fools this, love, but a holy thing to love what death can touch. For your love has lived in me. Your love once lifted me. Your word was a gift to me. To remember this brings painful joy. 'Tis a human thing, love, a holy thing to love what death can touch. Let us move on with the painful joy of remembering Michael. And first of all, after she's finished her phone call, we're going to talk to Barbara's sister, Jane Headley. Yes, I think
I do apologize.
that's quite all right. While that's happening, I think a toast to Michael's memory is in order. So raise your glasses. Here we are. Happy clinking. Michael, we remember you belovedly. You were an absolutely magnificent man. and you will be with us always, even though you are gone to another place. Shall we continue? All right. Yeah, if you'd like to come up here. Is that all right? Okay. Here we go. Jane Headley, Barbara's sister. Welcome.
Hello.
Hi.
I live outside of Philadelphia, and I'm delighted to be here with you today.
There we go.
Okay,
That's
good.
great. Don't have to talk right into it?
Can be heard.
Thank you.
I have known Michael exclusively really in the context of Barbara and Michael's 34-year marriage. And so it's in that context that I'll be saying a couple of things. Mid-marriage, Barbara said to me at one point that Michael was the love of her life. And I knew that by then, I think. And what epitomized it for me actually was the sound of Barbara's voice when she would be talking to Michael on the telephone. We fell into a habit of going to Stratford together once a year for Shakespeare and shopping. And so I would come up to Toronto and stay overnight with Barbara and Michael and visit with them. And then Barbara and I would take off together to Stratford, leaving Michael behind with Churchy and the cats. And when we got there, we would always phone our husbands just to touch base and say we're here. And chances are we would phone them every day that we were there. Usually my phone call would finish first, and I would come back to the room we were both in at the B&B, and I would hear Barbara's voice. And it didn't matter what she was saying. I didn't have to pay attention to that. Barbara has a very expressive musical voice. And what I could hear in that voice was that her interlocutor was someone who entirely loved her, who didn't want her to be anybody except who she was. I do think married couples sometimes make the mistake of thinking, if I could just change her in this or that way, all would be well. Michael never. I mean, maybe it was the therapist in him, or maybe it was the husband, or I guess she was the love of his life. And so he didn't seek to change her. And I would hear in Barbara's voice just a kind of delight in exchanging the daily trivia that they could exchange in one of these phone calls. So a kind of gaiety, a sense of mutual support and understanding. They were partners in so many ways. When Barbara and Michael were married, they asked various friends and relatives to participate in the ceremony, and what I was allotted was the reading of, the passage on charity from St. Paul's epistle to the Corinthians. Though I speak with the tongue of men and of angels and have not charity, although love is really a better word nowadays for what Paul is talking about. And those words are very much alive in my mind as I think of Barbara's marriage to Michael. Love never faileth. Love endureth all things, believeth all things, hopeth all things. What thinking about St. Paul's words and Barbara and Michael's married life in connection to each other makes me want to say today is that, yes, we've lost Michael, but we haven't lost Michael's love for us and for Barbara. It's present, it's here with us. We share it and will share it with Barbara and with each other going forward. Now abide faith, hope, and love, these three. But the greatest of these is love.
Thank you. I think applause is... And we're going to hear from Bernd Holman Eden. Sir. Okay, thank you very much. Welcome.
Thank you. Of course, I'm very touched already and moved to be here. I feel honored to be part of that community celebrating Michael's life. I want to start in saying that Barbara and Michael together were instrumental for Silke and me to become Canadian. You hear by accent that I'm originally from Germany, so you guys were just wonderful and very important for our journey. So Barbara asked me to possibly just read an email I spontaneously wrote after heard about Michael's death, and I'm happy to do so because when I reread it, I thought this was so spontaneous and there's not much to add. I would like to add maybe two personal, very moving episodes. I'm very sad and still try to recalibrate. Michael has been for me in many ways a wonderful wise mentor, inspiring dialogue partner, and always a very close friend, full of integrity and compassion. Michael was available for me in most difficult times. He encouraged me to go my own path when I felt a deep calling. And I just wanted to give you one example out of this. When I thought my professional identity, I was also a doctor and neuroscientist, and I loved my professional life. I was a professor, I had tons of students, traveling the world. But my calling was, and this is about 7-8 years ago, there's something else in me which wants to evolve. So he helped me in making that huge transition. So I stopped working from one day to the other and said, there's something else which will just evolve in myself. And he was the first one meeting me. He came with a little stone as a symbol of the new beginning. And yeah, it was a huge step for me to give up what I thought was my identity. And I'm still here with another identity, as you see. So it was exactly available for these very authentic moments. And we have heard that before, that he was really encouraging Barbara to be Barbara. He encouraged me to be Bernd. And this is very, very touching for me. And in that context, some of you may remember he had shared a dream. He was also wonderful in sharing dreams in one of the gatherings. And one of his dreams during the Toronto gathering circle at Judy's place, he was talking about the situation that he was somewhere walking and hundreds of people were trying to influence him from the right side and left side, voices he heard on his path. And the message basically was, don't listen to these voices, just continue on your path. So that's a short version, and Michael was just incredible in sharing these kind of experiences. I always appreciated Michael as a colleague, his passion and dedication for medicine. We had many stimulating discussions around innovation in healthcare, the need for patient empowerment, philosophy, science, the arts. Michael's presence in large and small gatherings was tangible all the time. He was just fully present. His skills to word or phrase even the vaguest ephemeral feelings, sensations, or dimensions were unbelievable. It was just a joy listening to him. Michael also cared very much about our family, specifically our son, John, so I feel very touched in vulnerable times. So Michael belongs to those people I took portraits of because I consider them to be the most impactful human beings in my life. So he's one of the 10 people I took portraits because I thought he's just an incredible person and was key for my own path. Michael was unconventional and fresh till the end of his life. So his teachings will be with me forever. Thank you.
We continue with Chris Neeson. I think this is going well. I really do feel that, Michael's spirit is here.
Yeah. Well, as Michael said, my name is Chris. And as with so many of you all, he was a dear and beloved friend of mine. Can you all hear me okay? Because I have a very soft voice. It's okay.
It's fine.
Fine? Good. But I also knew Michael in a whole other capacity, which helped to forge our friendship. I had the great pleasure of doing counseling together with Michael for over 20 years in what is known as co-therapy, which means there are two therapists working with a client or clients instead of one. So they got the benefit of two heads are better than one. I'll never forget the first day I met Michael, though. It was in our clinic called the Psychotherapy Institute. I knew someone new was coming, but anyway, the door kind of flew open, and this great force of energy entered the room first, and then Michael came in. He put out his hand, shook my husband's hand. I knew then he was a very special person, but little did I know how important he was to become not only in my life, my family's life, and all of our clients' lives. I also want to thank Kathy Vance for saying she wouldn't work with him, so that we got to work with him. So thank you, Kathy. The clients we worked with were so fortunate to have experienced his great insight, curiosity, wisdom, and empathy. They knew he sincerely cared for them as people, as well as being in a professional role as their mentor, guide, and therapist. As you all know, Michael had a wonderful sense of humor. There he is laughing. I have him here. I just love this picture, Barbara. And he also did co-therapy with my late husband, Larry. So in the clinic, so often we would hear great gales of laughter coming from their therapy room, because Larry loved to laugh, Michael loved to laugh. Michael could infect others with his laughter, and it was so often at his own expense, at his own foibles and frailties. But I think this was really helpful for our clients as well, because it showed them it's okay to laugh at oneself. It's okay to have the courage to be imperfect. I also particularly enjoyed translating some of his Groton School infinitely long words for the clients when they get that puzzled look. They're like, Michael, what? So it was fun, it was special, it was rewarding to work with such an extraordinary human being. But in closing, there's one other piece I forgot. I don't want to forget this part, because Michael had a fashion statement. And the clients and I would always wonder what shirt, and particularly what special tie was he wearing that day. So that was fun. We really enjoyed that. So in closing, I do want to wish to share something on a personal note, that as a friend to me, he helped me get through the darkest times of my life. When my husband fell ill and ultimately passed away, he would sit with me with the patience of Job, being witness to my grief, soothing my fears, and comforting my poor shredded soul. There was no one like you, Michael, nor I think will there ever be. I love you. I miss you. Goodbye, my dear friend.
We call upon Nikki DeHoe. Thank you.
Thank you. All of my interactions with Michael have occurred either in his holidays or my holidays, because I'm from Australia. And so I don't have that long continuity of friendship. So it's like pops and bursts in my life. Here are some of them. The first time I met Michael, he was swimming naked in a dam in the middle of the Australian bush. on a very hot summer's evening. He wasn't the only one swimming and he wasn't the only one naked, but he was the only one who lifted his arm and with a huge smile said, "Pleased to meet you." The second time I met Michael, he was a tiny figure striding along in the distance, in the dark, on the streets of Byron Bay. "What's he doing?" I said to Barbara. She said, "He won't go to bed until he's done his 10,000 steps for the day." I was so impressed. It was all I could do to make the 5 steps to the bedroom that night. So began our long and very interesting friendship. It would be absolutely impossible to describe our shared joys and interests because Michael could share on almost any subject under the sun. I used to wonder if I'd ever be able to find a subject that Michael couldn't tell me something about. I never could. He had an amazing and phenomenal breadth of knowledge. But unlike other people who have an amazing breadth of knowledge, Michael was also the world's greatest listener. To invite Michael into your confidence was like moving light into your direction. Suddenly his entire attention would be focused on you. All extraneous facts disappeared, and there he was, heart and soul. It could have been just the two of us in the whole world. This is a very beautiful form of love, and it must have been such a privilege to be one of his patients. As a friend, I certainly always felt heard in all of our intense conversations. Some of these conversations were about food. I love to cook, and Michael loves to cook. And this is where we occasionally crossed culinary swords. Many of these conversations were around the question, is it cooked yet? I recall one evening in Nova Scotia, Michael took an extremely large chicken out of the oven. And I said, "Michael, it's not cooked." He said, "It's been in for an hour." I said, pointing to the red and bloody thigh, "But it's not cooked, it's still bloody." And he said, "Blood is good." It did taste really good, I have to say. Michael was a very, very, very loyal friend, and I watched how he and Barbara over the years lovingly tended to their friend Mary Douglas with such patience and devotion. Michael was a very love in action kind of a guy. And very occasionally, however, that light would dim slightly and he would retreat into grouchiness. Not often. This was always around tax time. I've seen Michael sitting with a look of utter despair on his face, papers all around him, throw his arms into the air and head off to the kitchen for a lovely cup of tea. Doing his tax was, I think, the worst thing Michael ever tried to do. He could put off the tax until the tax man was practically breaking down the door. I could never talk about Michael without talking about Barbara, the greatest love of his life. Once when Barbara and I were on one of our trips through Australia somewhere, Michael managed to supply Barbara with a different card for every day they were apart. I thought that was the most romantic thing I'd ever seen. We had this long line of beautiful, funny, lovely, adorable cards lining the fireplace of our Airbnb. And somehow, for a man who couldn't get his tax together, he'd managed to buy all these cards, write something gorgeous in each one, and get them to Barbara for every day that we weren't together, they weren't together. Of course, along with these tokens of undying love for the woman of his dreams, came also his bête noire, his nemesis, and his truly equal opponent. I refer, of course, to Mr. Churcher, Barbara's African grey parrot, whom Michael nobly fed and watered when Barbara was away, although at arm's length. It was a complicated relationship. Two men in love with the same woman in the same house. On our very first night in Canada, Mr. Churcher entertained us all by opening the front door several times, boiling the kettle many times, ringing the telephone many times, and when that still failed to get our attention, he decided that the way to get it was to replay the last discussion that Barbara and Michael had together, beginning, "Oh, Barbara, Barbara," which had me turning to look and see if it really was Michael speaking right then and there. They were noble opponents, those two. Finally, in the words of Rudyard Kipling, who I'm sure Michael would be able to tell me so much, I have these words: "That man is a success who leaves the world better than he found it, who has never lacked appreciation for Earth's beauty or failed to express it, who looked for the best in others and gave the best he had." Thank you, Michael, and thank you, Barbara, for giving me the privilege of being here to celebrate the life of your most extraordinary man.
Thank you. And there are some people I haven't met visually. So, thank you, Anne.
Hi, I'm so pleased to be here. And what I have to say is going to be repetitious, I'm afraid, except for the nude swimming and a few of your other anecdotes, but the sentiments are, you've heard them from many people. And I'm here with a community of people that have been living with Barbara and Michael for the last 3+ years, the sumac. So this is more recent history. So here's from our community. So Michael belonged to all of us new and uncertain settlers at the sumac, and his loss will be deeply felt by the many who were warmed and comforted by his gentle leadership. In his role as our inaugural chair of our building's operating committee and the many personal connections he established, Michael's reach was long and far and deep. And I'm reading a book at home, a book about James Baldwin, in which he identifies a number of virtues to which he aspired. And as I was reading this book, it occurred to me that the list captures many of the qualities that I think we came to associate with Michael. First of those is resilience. And Michael brought a stubborn staying power in his position to this chair of our operating board. And as you can imagine, in a new building, countless plans and procedures need to be worked out, and new residents can be anxious and impatient. Michael retained his patience and respect for each of us, when many of us would have tossed in the towel. And he negotiated the passage of his illness with the same dignity. I remember the last time Michael visited my apartment, I put together a small farewell gathering for a resident who was leaving the sumac, and Barbara pushed Michael in his wheelchair from their suite to mine, and it was clear that he was glad to be present among friends, even in the face of his struggles. That was a most tender occasion. Perception. As others have said, Michael had an uncanny ability to know when things were not as they initially appeared to be. He was able to tease out what was really bothering us when we brought our disgruntled complaints, making it more likely that the problem could be effectively solved. Charity. 2 quick examples. When Michael noticed many of us having trouble carting groceries and other heavy items to our suites, he simply bought a pink wagon for all to use. And that generous gift has made many trips and saved many arms and backs. On a personal note, on a stinking hot Friday afternoon several years ago, I reluctantly called Michael. I knew that, as a retired doctor, he was not here for us to consult about our endless ailments. I had been hiking that day and managed to prick a finger. It had swelled to several times its normal size and was throbbing, but I thought I had just sprained it or possibly broken it and intended to wait until Monday to have it seen by a doctor. I just wanted Michael's assurance that it was okay to wait. Without hesitation, he came right over and told me I needed to get to a hospital immediately. Without being overly dramatic, he was responsible for sparing me a major infection, surgery, and possibly losing that finger. And I'm sure I'm not the only one at the sumac who called on Michael for medical advice that he was not there to give. Individuality. One was comfortable with Michael because he appeared comfortable with himself. He seemed to confront life openly and honestly, free of false identity or corrupting ego. He was able to express and defend an opinion that differed from the group with ease and without expecting everyone to agree with his way, seeing things his way. Intelligence. Are these sounding familiar? Michael was not quick to judge. Whatever was in a book he had read, a play he had just seen, or a big conflict that was brought to him to resolve, he had the great capacity to listen, gather information, sift and weigh, and arrive at a workable solution. And spiritual force. And I didn't know much about Barbara and Michael's long-time meditation practice. But as they say, the proof is in the pudding, as evidenced by his equanimity, his joyfulness, and his presence in all that he did. And I'm so glad to meet so many of your group, the gathering here today. That's really lovely. In short, Michael Vesselago was a man of high character with lessons to teach us. Michael signed his emails to us, "Love Michael." That made me squirm a little at first. But Michael was comfortable with demonstrable signs of affection, and we sometimes chilly northerners learned to be more so. And I think he did love us, and we loved him. But that in no way diminishes the ache only you can feel, Barbara. On those days when you miss Michael most, remember how he loved you. Do that for yourself, in his name, in his honor. Love yourself as he loved you. Michael would like that. He would like that very much indeed.
I'm going to take a break to give you a chance to stretch your legs, breathe, think, use the facilities possibly. About 10 minutes. Is that all right? We're okay? Good. Well, it was nice to have a break. It's been wonderful to hear all of these recollections of Michael. So many times hearing something really unique, and all of a sudden one of those fabulous photographs comes up and you can hear that laughter. It's quite an afternoon. Now we're going to hear from Rory Nissan, who I must say is a really sharp dresser.
Yeah, we really took advantage of that 2-for-1 discount, Michael. Thank you. I'm Chris's son, by the way, and I actually reached out to my sister who's in France for a few words as well. So I'm going to share my time with her, and it'll be pretty brief, but it's all I think we both felt, well, she had to write it down, but I also felt that it would be nice to write it to think it through. So I'll start with my sister's, Alicia's remarks. When I split open my foot in Haiti, I called Michael. When I got E. coli in Uganda, I called Michael. When I lost my peripheral vision after an earthquake, I called Michael. Whenever life threw some odd and unexpected curveball, I called Michael. Michael was the easy calm in emotional dark storms, a cadence in his voice that was remarkable in its consistency. He appeared in my life sometime in adolescence, though in my memory he was always there. He didn't need to make a grand entrance. He was always there. So many Christmases did we spend eating and drinking and opening thoughtful presents for literally hours, because we could always find a gift that carried a story or a memory or symbol of something beautiful shared. My dad and Michael were great buddies, mutually supportive colleagues, and both knew how to laugh. Michael and I cried together for missing my dad, and I know that loss left a special void in him, as it did me. Though we both could transform near tears into billowing joy by recounting any one of the many audacious adventures Michael and Dad had. A wonderful moment was when Michael spoke at my wedding. This is my sister talking, I'm not married yet. Stepping in for my dad, but somehow representing him with a speech that was as ethereal and cerebral as my own father would have done. I felt Dad looking down at Michael, a proud smirk on his face. Michael's dogged commitment to life is what I will remember forever. Building relationships, reflecting on his life, and unabashedly sharing the failures that built him into the man he became. And most of all, the love he had for me and for my family. He was family to me. I miss him already, though I can hear his voice when I close my eyes, saying as he did every time, "Alicia, how wonderful to hear from you." Now my part. It starts with, "Hello, Rory." In his welcome, he was already lifting up the receiver. A bear hug always could be relied on. He hugged the heart. A former partner of mine, after meeting Michael and being on the receiving end of a hug, his steely eyes and his warm smile, exclaimed to me, "He's James Bond." And in the middle of a sea of papers on his desk and in his office, there was that little message right under the computer monitor that said, "Breathe." I remember seeing that, and I didn't get it. I was like, "What do you mean breathe? I'm breathing right now." It turned out I wasn't really, knowing how I was breathing. And even just to get me to a 1 on understanding meditation was wonderful. So breathe, meditation, mediation, mindful listening, heart-led, accepting, giving of gifts, giving of himself. A quiet spot, or a not so quiet spot, like on one of our last proper walks when he took me to a small parkette here in Toronto. "This is a nice place," he said. Is it? I thought. It's noisy. It's like where the gardener and the DVP come together. Like, I could hear the trailers. I could hear every car. But only recently did I realize it was a nice spot, not because it was perfect, but because it was a place to be. Not quiet, but calm, made so by him. Doctor, mentor, friend, and family. Tired, naps, Ironman athlete. Tall and strong, and towards the end, a little less tall and a little less strong. A teacher, patient and confident. A student, respectfully listening and learning. A finger in the air. I'm not done. Sorry, Michael, but in the waiter's defense, you've been eating for almost an hour. I think the food's turning. But he said 100 chews per bite. I think that was a number, right? 100 chews, I think it was. That's what he had learned, but maybe 100 wasn't needed, he added, but it was a good goal. It took me a while to learn to wait when the phone went quiet, to not try to fill the gap in the silence. Once I learned that, the best advice was about to come. Finally, a body that was used up, a mind still sharp. His body aged as it must. He was never old, though. His imprint was on countless people. Michael was always so present, and he still is. Thank you.
Thank you, Lord. Now we'll hear from John Rothwell.
Following Rory, I'm noticing the difference in generations. Rory had all his notes on his iPhone. I've got the latest technology here. I just noticed that Chris had said something earlier about the fact that sometimes it was useful to have somebody kind of translate what Michael had been saying, because sometimes it got a lot of words in there and what did he say? So I have the phrase that I've used with Michael, that he would never use a small word when a diminutive one would suffice. I'll just tell a brief story about Michael. We spent several years going with the gathering group up to the Ecology Retreat Center in Orangeville. And they had separate rooms for each of the people or couples. But they only had 2 washrooms, 2 very large washrooms, one for the men and one for the women. I have no idea what went on in the women's because I was never in there, but in the men's, they had a whole line of sinks lined up where the guys would get together in the morning and we'd all be shaving and washing our faces. And I was standing there shaving one morning and Michael was standing next to me. And he was shaving. We both had our razors out and I looked over and Michael was standing on one foot. I said, Michael, why are you standing on one foot? He says, it helps with my balance. And so I practice that every time I'm shaving. I'll stand on one foot and it helps with my balance. And you got to exercise to. I thought, gee, he's probably got a good idea there. I should try that. So I did. Michael standing here, all lathered up, shaving. I was standing next to him, all lathered up with my razor in my hand, shaving, standing on one foot. And I quickly learned something from Michael, because as I'm standing on one foot, trying to hold my balance with this very sharp instrument in my hand that I'm scraping across my face, I very quickly realized this is not a good idea, at least not for me. And so that's one of my favorite memories of Michael shaving at Orangeville. Barbara's smiling. Thank you.
Fred Murphy will join us now. Thank you.
Well, I have been lucky enough to spend most of my time with Michael at their cottage, which is such a beautiful, beautiful place. And I was always welcomed and I just felt so comfortable there. I was there when Michael first came to the cottage from Seattle. And it's been so beautiful to watch the evolution of their relationship, because they were both so respectful and kind, and they gave each other such room in their relationship to be who they are and do what they wanted to do. And I was amazed. I was totally inspired by that. Michael was such a nature boy. And in our relationship, the three of us would often go hiking, or not often, but enough times that we would go snowshoeing or hiking, or to find a waterfall in a beautiful spot and check it out. And Michael, especially before he got chronic fatigue, had so much energy. He was like jumping over logs and walking over moss-covered things, and he would run ahead or walk ahead fast, and Barbara and I would be going behind, and then he would double back, go all the way around us, and then keep going several times. It's the only way he could keep his energy, and not in a condescending way, just like, feel like a puppy. It was like having a puppy on the trip. It was beautiful. I thought of him as Billy Goat Gruff after that. And even after getting chronic fatigue, I think he had more energy than many, many people I know. And his intellectual and emotional energy was huge and really beautiful. I really appreciate knowing you both. In Ireland, when someone dies, rather than saying, "I'm so sorry," people say, "I stand with you." Thank you.
Nancy Mill.
Wow, it's kind of tough to come at the end of all this. My gosh. The addresses have just been wonderful. I'm going to be touching on some of the same themes that you've heard, but I have a different take and touch on a few of those things. So, and I don't trust myself not to read my words, hold myself together and to be composed, so I'm going to read. Barbara asked me if I would speak about Michael as a central figure in our spiritual community. I feel both honored and challenged by this invitation. As a community, we have worked together with Julia Press, where we find deep meaning in exploring the depth and breadth of expanding consciousness. Barbara so beautifully described us as the intimate body of souls who are so deeply entwined in everything Michael became. I couldn't have said it any better than that. There are several people in this room who have known Michael in much the same way as I have for 30 plus years. It is a responsibility in representing them and myself to do justice to his contribution to our community and to our personal growth. Michael had dynamism. I've heard lots about it today. He had a positive presence and was a contributor always. We reap the rewards of his lifelong study of medicine, meditation, and several other modalities. We struggled impatiently in early days to stay with his inquisitive mind, as it wended its own rambling way, waiting for the words to come to him. We were impatient with it, wanting him to get to the point. Over time, we did learn patience, to slow down enough to stay with him, and eventually be rewarded by his insights and summations. And in fairness, he learned also to arrive there a little faster and could laugh at himself. We grew together more heartfully. He introduced me and many of us to Rumi, the 13th century philosopher and scholar, and would often at a gathering find just the perfect poem to illustrate and summarize a recent exploration. I would like to share another Rumi poem with you, not one that I remember him sharing with us, but one from his copy of the illuminated Rumi that accompanied him to every gathering. I thought it would synthesize the nature of our evolving work for you. It's called Give Birth Slowly. A new moon teaches gradualness and deliberation, and how one gives birth to oneself slowly. Patience with small details make perfect a large work, like the universe. What 9 months of attention does for an embryo, 40 early mornings will do for your gradually growing wholeness. I'd like to tell you just a few other things that I noted about Michael. His ongoing desire to be of service was evident in his work with our community. He was a wonderful listener and friend, as you've heard so often today. So helpful and generous with his time and sharing his knowledge to anyone who asked. I especially remember an occasion when he and I met halfway between his home and mine, so he could supervise me having to take nitroglycerin for the first time. He recognized how nervous I was. As a doctor, he was calm and matter-of-fact, what I really needed in that moment. Over time, I became aware of Michael's appreciation for beautiful things. He had a real aesthetic sense. He would have loved the flowers in this room today. I wore this long cover today in celebration of his love for flowers. Further evidence of his appreciation of beautiful things was his dearest friend, Barbara. He brought great beauty into his life when he married her. He was her biggest fan and supporter. Together they lived with wonder and the simple astonishment of being alive, apart and together. And I don't see this ever ending, despite Michael not being here in this dimension in physical form. I would say, too, that he found a more mundane beauty in the mystery of food. Here we go on food, dueling, whatever here. He was very particular about his choices. For instance, watching him prepare and enjoy the elaborate porridge concoctions he would assemble for breakfast was something to behold. His large bowl often overflowing. Michael was a positive, dynamic presence, even when living with so much pain and later being more debilitated. He demonstrated great courage throughout his illness and could rise up, beaming momentarily out of his pain in recognition or to share an insight. Michael's final lesson to us was in how to let go, and to the final letting go of life, which he did with uncomplaining grace. He was remarkable. In my visit to Michael in hospital, he thanked me for my friendship. I don't think I adequately thanked him for his to me. Early on when I needed it, I felt supported and reassured that I was onto something in this journey, that I was on the right track for me. I will forever be grateful that I continued on this path. I think I can safely speak for all of us when I say, thank you, Michael, for sharing your knowledge and offering each of us your love and tireless support. We will continue to travel with you always. Actually, you will continue to travel with us always. Somewhat the same thing, but a twist.
Carol Baxter.
I am Carol Baxter.
Yes. You are here.
And I'm one of the people living at the sumac very happily. And I want to give you a vision of Michael that I decided to gift you with. All right. Michael Vesselago. Michael is well named, an archangel, ready to touch the heavens, ready to celebrate his place in mystery and wonder and love. His journey is star-dusted, a vessel of knowledge and spirit and wisdom as he pursues his journey to the stars and beyond. This journal is glorious, full of wonder and love, full of hope and beauty, full of warm wishes that go beyond the frail body, the earth-tide thoughts and confusions. Michael is now knowing a supreme beauty of spirit. He is voyaging in a universe that is made of spirit, where he is full of wonder and love and peace.
Thank you all. And is there anyone else who would like to share anything with us? Here is your opportunity. Have you been prompted to leap over your reticence and be courageous and say something about Michael? No? Thank you very much. Well then, I would ask you on behalf of Barbara and Michael's memory to raise your glasses in a toast to Michael. I don't think there are any words I can say that will encapsulate what has been said here today any better. So, embrace the silence. Michael. Thank you to all who helped to organize this event, especially to Judy Rothwell. And please note that a station has been set up just over here. I'm going to go Brian. David's got to follow me with the camera. This rock might be 1 billion years old. And you have a chance to autograph it yourself. Or to, if you like, indulge your artistic passion. A flower, a crayfish, a star, a Volkswagen rabbit. Whatever you like, please indulge yourself. And these rocks will be gathered together in memory of Michael, whatever comes to you, and they'll be given to Barbara to mark the site where Michael's ashes are going to be buried at the cottage. A lifelong gift of memory. They're right over there. Oh, we have an artist, as a matter of fact, busily working away right now. That's wonderful. There's also an area for dancing, if you like. You're encouraged to enjoy yourselves.
I don't think we have to rush off either.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's good to know.
I think so.
Do remember Michael. And remember that enjoying himself was something he loved to do. Thank you, everyone.